All right, Miss Sandra, thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited. We've been in constant contact since our last interview for my summit last year. But this is the first time that we've actually hopped back on Zoom for another interview. So I'm super stoked for this one. But for anybody who doesn't maybe know who you are, wants to learn a little bit more about you, if you just want to give us kind of a brief background on who you are. And then I always like to kind of hear why a certain person got into the authoring world and maybe what kind of drove them towards wanting to help other authors as well. So, floor's yours.
I'm always happy to talk with you, Philip. So thank you for inviting me. So I'll start with the second half of that because it leads into the first half in terms of what got me into authoring. I have a journalism degree, so I am a writer by trade. I have a journalism degree and I split my time between working as a freelance writer for clients and teaching authors how to market their books. So the skills dovetail very nicely. Um, I've been doing this for quite some time. I got my journalism and public relations degree when dinosaurs roamed the earth and started my first half of my career as a national award-winning publicist and kind of burned out on all that pitching. And so better tapped into the journalism side of my education and experience. And that's what I've been doing in the second half of my career is writing and then working with authors. And what drove me to begin working with authors was I had a lot of personal experience. I have three traditionally published books, all of which were published, two of which were published completely before social media hit the scene. So we're talking quite a while ago. And then the third one was published just maybe as Twitter was starting to show up here and there, but I learned how to market and promote books without social media, which I've discovered in today's day and age is actually a valuable skill. While social media is an important tool, it's not the only one authors can use. And there are a lot of people who just don't like using social media. So having these sort of more traditional approaches can be very useful in that, in that respect. But I had this background in doing it. I had an opportunity to create an online course for authors through a network I'm connected to, and that just grew into teaching authors not just how to publicize their books, but how to market it big picture using social media and other means. So it's working with authors today is really a national out extension or natural extension of how I started my career, while inventing fire in the wheel.
Yeah, I don't believe you. You're not that old. Uh, yeah, that's awesome. I think it's funny. I'm not one of the authors that really is big into social media. Even before I became an author, I've just never been that turned on to social media for some reason. I
Mhm.
don't know why. I've never had a Twitter. I've never had TikTok. I barely use Facebook. It's just not something I'm ever really into. But I do know that there is power behind it when done correctly, especially
Mhm.
if we're talking about the authoring world. Um, so, we're going to be talking about marketing here, and we actually have a pretty cool topic that you're going to talk about here. But before we get into that, why is it important for an author to kind of start thinking about a marketing plan? And a question that I have is like, is there a time? Is there a time that's too early to start thinking about it? Is there a time that's too late? Is there like a perfect time? Like, do you have any like thoughts on that? I know it's kind of a loaded question, but I'm just curious.
No, it makes sense. And it's never too late, to be honest. It's never too late to figure out how you are going to determine your target audience and how you're going to get in front of them. So, a book marketing plan, I like to tell authors to think of it as their book marketing blueprint. It is a document, literally a document that you create. It's a document that helps you determine where you are and where you want to go and how you're going to get there. And you can see the value in that because if there's so many old sayings about this, failing to plan is planning to fail. If you don't know where you're going, you're not going to know when you get there. You've heard them all.
Yeah.
And this applies to a book marketing plan because if you don't know what you want to accomplish from a marketing standpoint, besides sell a lot of books, which is not specific enough in terms of goals. If you don't know what you want to accomplish, you're not really going to be able to figure out how you're going to accomplish it. So think of a book marketing plan. It could, I said blueprint. It can also be your roadmap to authoring success.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Now I'm curious. So for this, I like the fact that it's like it's never too late because there's probably people listening or watching. They'll be like, "Ah, well, I've got, maybe like I'm right about to start publishing my book, so I started too late, or I've got multiple books out and I've never really thought about marketing, so it's too late." So it's like, no, it does. Like, you just get started now, and you just kind of learn the right systems and processes, and you kind of said blueprints and roadmaps and stuff like that. And that can kind of help you develop maybe your own marketing plan or take one that works and just tailor it to yourself. So, are there questions like authors should be asking themselves when they're putting a marketing plan together, that would help them kind of lay this out in the right order?
There are, and to your point about, oh gosh, I haven't really figured out my book marketing plan. Is it too late? I just want to point out that one thing authors don't understand is that your book doesn't need to be new to sell. Readers really don't care when your book was published, unless maybe your book is on a topic, maybe a tech topic that changes very rapidly, like a book on crypto that came out 2 years ago is probably out of date by now. But both with there are a lot of nonfiction topics that are evergreen, but both with certain nonfiction books, most nonfiction books, and most fiction, it doesn't matter when your book was published. Readers they don't even know when it was published. All they care about is that it's a good book. So even if your book has been out for a year and a half and you are thinking that, well, how can I market it now? It's so old. It's not so old. As long as it's, well done, people are going to be interested in buying it. So don't think that your book is so old that it's not going to work. Wherever you are in the process, whether you're just still writing your book or it's been out for quite a while and you're feeling kind of hopeless, here are the questions to ask yourself as you create a book marketing plan. And Philip, I do want to point out that as part of my presentation, readers can download my free book marketing plan template. So I just want to remind them, and let's remember at the end too, but that's a fill in the blanks form that will relate to the questions I'm going to go through. It's a fill in the blanks form. It has instructions and it has examples of each of the elements of a book marketing plan. So it's just kind of think of it as a mini course in PDF form that you don't have to pay for. So the first question, Philip, is I want you to say, answer this question. What is my book publishing situation? And with that, you think about what's my book about and what makes it different from other competitive books. And by the way, if you're really serious about book marketing, you do need to know what your competition is. You need to know what other authors are in your genre and what books are popular and what books are similar to yours. Same for nonfiction. But what is your book about? What makes it different? From others that you compete against. Um, what makes the book marketable? For example, there's so many things that can make a book marketable, but let's look at fiction for a second. Let's say that you've used an innovative approach to writing your book. Um, one approach that came out a few years ago is that people sometimes will write a book in the form of email messages back and forth. That's kind of novel, that's kind of different, and that sort of difference makes a book marketable. What makes you marketable as the author of this book? You might have certain credentials that qualify you more than anybody else, and that boosts the power of the book because you are the right person to be writing that book. So it's what's the book about, what's its differentiator, and what makes you in the book marketable. I'm sure that resonates with you, Philip, right?
Yeah, it does. It makes a lot of sense. The only question I have about that question is, Does it matter if you're self-published or traditionally published? Do all these questions apply the same exact way across the board, or does it differ a little bit?
What a great question. Well, that is a great question. Big picture, no, it doesn't matter what your publishing model is, doesn't matter at all. The only difference is when you're considering your situation, in this case, you want to you factor in the fact that you've got a traditional publisher, and you want to find out what is that publisher going to do to market your book. That's really important if you're traditionally published. Unfortunately, it's probably not a lot for most authors. They're lucky if the publisher sends out review copies in advance. Maybe if they're lucky, they'll send out a book announcement press release, and offer copies to the press. Um, and sometimes you get a lot more support, but chances are you won't get a lot of support. But you do want to know what is that support, because if your publisher is going to do a lot to support your book, what you want to do is supplement that. You want to find out, okay, here's what they're doing. What else needs to happen that I can add into that plan? And then you collaborate with your publisher's in-house publicist to make sure that you are both using your skills and networks appropriately. So I'm really glad you asked that question.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You clarified that great. Okay, that's the only question I had about that
Mhm.
question. So, question number two, what do we ask
Yeah,
ourselves?
so the next question is, ask yourself, who did I write this book for? And Philip, this is probably the most important question of all of those. And I've got 7 questions I want authors to ask themselves as they create their book marketing plan. But the reason who did I write this book for is so important is because um, the more focused you are about who your target audience is for your book, the more you know about your ideal reader, the less you'll be spinning your wheels as you try to market to that ideal reader. A lot of times, so many times I work with authors and I'll say, okay, who's your target audience for this book? And they'll go, oh, everybody. Everybody will love my book. Everybody, teenagers, retired people, they'll all love this book because it's such an important book. And Philip, even with the bestsellers, that's just not fact. So I have to help them see that in an ideal world, it would be everybody, but we don't live in an ideal world. So the reality is, it's a subset of everybody. There are certain personality types or certain people who read romance novels. Um, there's another type who reads fitness books. So you need to figure out really who will love your book, and that's who you wrote that book for. And if you wrote it for yourself, meaning if it's you wrote the book that you wanted to read, that tells you a lot right there because your target audience is probably just like you. So what do you know about yourself that can help you get your book title in front of people like you? You know what social networks you like to use. You know what TV talk shows you write. You know what blogs you read. All of those sorts of things. So it seems counterintuitive, but the more narrow your audience is, the more books you are going to sell. Because when you really focus in and when you think of bullseyes, when you get to the center of that bullseye, that's your real target reader. The more you focus in on that bullseye, the more effective you will be with your book marketing. You will be using the right messaging and the right language. You will be using the right platforms to reach them. You will be telling them what they want to hear because you know them so well. And they will respond to that rather than, again, going to that bullseye, going to the outer circles in that bullseye. That the outer circles are so much broader than that target in the center that you're going to have a lot of wasted space, essentially, a lot of wasted time. It's like you're just kind of throwing that dart in the air and it hits wherever, and it's usually the wrong place because it's not right in the bullseye, right?
Yeah, I think a couple of points that come to mind when you said those, kind of talking through that question, is I know this is like a saying in the online like marketing world, but it's like if you market to everyone, you're marketing to no one. So it's kind of like if you're writing a book to everyone, you're basically writing a book to no one because it's too big of a, you're casting too big of a net. And it's just like you said, in an ideal world, we would just want everybody in the world to read our books, but it's just not the case. And also, and I just, from talking to authors and stuff like this, they get kind of overwhelmed or anxious, like, oh, I'm focusing on like just one ideal reader, but like that's just, that person's just representing a group of people. So like
Mhm.
I wrote my book for me because I'm like, I love these kind of books, I'm just going to write the kind of book I like to read. And nobody knows me better than I know myself, so that right there, like you mentioned, gave me an idea of, well, if I like my book, there's a good chance that people like me, that like the things
Mhm.
I like, the shows I watch, the movies I watch, other books I read, like that's going to be, you know, probably a pretty good starting point for finding my ideal reader. So I think kind of the things that you mentioned in there made perfect sense.
Yeah, good. It's so interesting that that my example of, if you wrote it for you, you've got a head start. You did exactly that. So the third question is, what do I want to accomplish with my book marketing? And this is all about your goals. And what I mean by that in terms of goals is I'm thinking in terms of tangible goals. I don't mean broader concepts like change the world. Um, I mean, really, I want you to be really specific about what you think your book marketing can accomplish for you. So, for a lot of authors, Phillips, they want to be an Amazon category bestseller. So, if that is, and that's a realistic goal for a lot of authors. Kind of depends on the category, obviously, but a lot of Philip, a lot of authors. You're probably one of them. I am, who have been Amazon category bestsellers. So you know that's achievable. And so some authors will have that down as one of their goals. So when you know that's your goal, then you put together a plan that helps you determine how are you going to reach that goal. Um, Other people, say nonfiction authors, their goal might be something like, say, my biggest goal is to use my book to generate better paying and more paid speaking opportunities. Or it might be using my book as a big business card to generate more consulting contracts. So your goal is very specific to you, but it should also be very specific. You might say something like, instead of saying, my goal is to sell a lot of books, your goal might be, my goal is to sell 1,000 books in the first year, which people are going, 1,000 books, I'm going to sell 20,000 books. Well, I'm always tempering things with realism because most books don't sell more than 500 copies. So I feel like I'm shooting for the sky if I say 1,000. So it's what do you want to accomplish? And you want to be very, very specific because goals need to be measurable. You won't know if you've hit that goal if you can't quantify it somehow, right?
100%. Now I have a question because this is where my mind always goes. This is just who I am naturally as a person. Is my natural tendency is to make a goal so big and audacious that when I say it out loud to somebody, they're like, "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Or I don't know if that's possible." But it's like, you know, I'm thinking, and I don't do this all the time, but it's always my first thought. I usually talk myself off the ledge a little bit just to be a little bit more realistic, right? But it's like if I set my goal so high and I miss it, but I'm putting all that effort in to hit that crazy goal, the chances are I'm probably going to be further along than if I would have set a smaller goal that maybe I was like 99% sure I'm going to hit. So when you talk to authors, is it like you said, I love the thing that you said where it's like the goal needs to be specific to the author, but it needs to be specific. So it's like you specific, what is your goal, and then make that goal specific. So do we want to be more realistic here? Or should we be audacious and big dream go getters or what?
I love that you're asking that because I will tell you, I am. I'm somebody who shoots for the top and then works her way down. But that's because I can handle disappointment. I think you really need to know yourself. So you shoot high, and you're absolutely right, Philip. You're that much farther ahead, even if you don't get that high. And you can handle it. You're like, yeah, well, nice try, Philip. What's for supper tonight? That kind of thing. But some people can't. And some people are crushed very quickly by disappointment. And boy, I really relate to those people. You get numb to it after a while, and that's why I can shoot high. I can handle disappointment because I've had my share of it.
Yeah.
So you really need, I think, to know yourself. Are you the type of person who does, reach for the stars, and can handle it if you only get as far as the moon? Or are you somebody who is better off playing it safe and stays a little more realistic? And then when you hit that realistic goal, then you can expand it. So factor yourself, your personality into that sort of thing.
That's a perfect answer. Yep, my goal would never be the same goal as my wife's, and
Mhm.
gives her a heart attack every time I say something out loud. So that makes so much sense.
Absolutely, and that's why you're married. You got that balance there,
That's right. Yeah.
She can put a lid on you once in a while, and you can light a fire under her once in a
Yeah.
while.
They're sane and insane, but I'm all right taking the
Yeah,
insane.
I thought between the two of you, it you negate each other.
Awesome. All right.
So
Question number 4.
yeah, the next one is, what's my book marketing strategy? Now, Philip, this is one where sometimes people get hung up just on that word strategy. So I want to focus on the word strategy. Strategy is your overarching thinking for how you're going to approach your book marketing. And it will help, I think, if I give you a couple of examples about that. Um, as I mentioned, I'm a writer. So my strategy, and it's one that fits with my audience too, but my strategy is to use my writing skills to market my books. So that means I will write and send out press releases in a specific type of press release called a tip sheet. I blog every week. So I use my writing skills for my blog to build my audience. I do a lot of guest blogging on other sites. I love creating online courses, so that starts with just a written approach to the course content before I deliver it through video or whatever. Sometimes I have a few courses that are actually all written. Um, so because I'm a writer, my strategy is nearly all the time going to depend on just writing. Now, if I had a younger audience, say I wrote YA, young adult fiction, my strategy might be different. My strategy might be based on how those people consume content. So my strategy might be to A, master video, which I have not, and B, create videos, use videos to engage my fan base and my target readers. So it's a question of what what's from a big picture standpoint, what's the best way to reach your audience? And again, for me, it's leveraging my skills for writing. For somebody else, it might be using video because they're really good at it and that works with their audience. If you're a memoir writer, I would encourage you to focus on public speaking as part of your book, as your book marketing strategy, because your memoir is so personal. And memoir readers like to know more about the person who told that story that they think they will like or that they've already read and they will like. So it's memoir writers, it's important to connect face to face, not one on one, but face to face with their target audience. And by public speaking, that doesn't have to be in person. It can also be virtually, like you and I, this talking today. This is a form of public speaking that's virtual. So think about kind of, if I were talking about a business book, Philip, I would say, business book audiences, they're on LinkedIn. So I would say to you, I'm going to focus 95% on using LinkedIn for my business book through not only networking and relevant posting, but I would use LinkedIn's publishing platform as well to share a lot of content related to my business book. So it's sort of like that, that big picture. How am I going to approach this? That then helps you figure out the specific tactics you're going to use to reach your audience and to reach your goals.
Yeah, that makes sense. So like for fiction writers, this being like a fiction marketing summit, would typically be, just in my opinion, since I am a fiction writer, is like you use your writing skills because you write well and you're doing it all the time. You've honed your craft and it's refined and stuff like that. But like as fiction writers, we're naturally, hopefully, creative. We can use words and try to connect on emotions and stuff like that. Would your initial like thought be using your writing for that strategy, or would trying video, if you're good on video, still be a strategy that's applicable for something like that?
You might take it up one level and frame it as use your storytelling skills to connect with your audience because that's what fiction writers do best. So use your storytelling skills, and that might be by if you're building an email list, it could be creating a reader magnet or a lead magnet, whatever language you want to use, freebie, your digital download. It might be telling a short story, a very short story, because people have short attention spans. They don't want to read anything very long. It could be telling a story in written form, but video, I think, is a great way to share your storytelling skills as well. So, and it's interesting that this is a fiction writing summit, but you know what? Philip, what I've discovered is that half of my audience writes both fiction and nonfiction. So
Oh, okay.
isn't that kind of funny?
Yeah.
They're gifted. They are so gifted. There's no way I could do both. But anyway, yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. And to me, it sounds like most of what we're talking about is very applicable to both sides. So it's like,
Mhm.
even if you're on here, let's say somebody just happened on here and it just happened to be nonfiction, even though it's very clearly a fiction. Like there are a lot of topics, not even just this interview, but just, other talks that it's like you can take these strategies. Yes, we're gearing it towards fiction, but most of the time, a lot of the ways that can be used for fiction can also be taken to other directions and stuff like that. If you write both, which is, you're right, that's hard to do because those are two different brains
Oh, it is
going to work there.
definitely. And I've only got one brain, so I can't pull it off.
Yeah, same
But
here.
you bring up such a good point. And before I move on to the next question, I'll just add that from my perspective, one of the biggest mistakes that fiction writers make is they think if it's not labeled fiction, it doesn't apply to them. It won't work for them. And you are 100% right. Nearly everything that works for nonfiction works for fiction. I wouldn't flip it and say it's the other way around necessarily, but generally speaking, tactics that help sell a nonfiction book also help sell novels. The problem is that sometimes you have to make just this little shift in how you think or how you look at it to discover how you can leverage it as a novelist. But I'll tell you, the novelists who do this do better than anybody else. And just one quick example. And actually, you know what? I'll give you the example with my next question, because my next question is, what tactics will you use to reach your goals? So, playing off of that, one tactic that is really effective for novelists, but they think is only limited to nonfiction authors, is when you go on a virtual book tour, you are visiting online sites where you might get a book review or an author Q&A. Maybe you'll write a guest post, maybe it's a podcast interview. But it's all about your new book or recently released book, whatever it might be. That's how fiction writers think, understandably, and that's appropriate. But if you just bring in this nonfiction idea, which is when nonfiction authors go on a virtual book tour, or even 3 years after their book is published, they're out there promoting their book, they are looking for blogs that are relevant to the topic of their book. So let's say that the book is on how to have a vegetable garden, how to create a thriving vegetable garden. They're going to look for blogs for gardeners. They're topic specific blogs. Now, if fiction writers dig into those nonfiction topics in their books, they can approach those nonfiction bloggers as well. So let's say somebody has written a novel where the protagonist is a gardener, is a vegetable garden, might even be a produce, maybe a truck farm owner, but in any case, they grow vegetables or they garden. It's a big part of the story. Everything kind of revolves around what happens in the garden. Gardening bloggers would love to talk to a novelist who set their story in a garden. They would love that. They would be asking, this is genius. My followers would love this. Why did you pick a garden? What kind of research did you do? Are you a gardener yourself? What's your favorite vegetable to grow? I mean, think about the potential if you zero in on those nonfiction nuggets in your fiction and pursue nonfiction blogs on those little nonfiction nuggets. That's a tactic. A tactic is exactly what you're going to do to reach your goals. So other tactics, Philip, might be figuring out how to use Instagram well and building a following on Instagram, because that's where that's a social network your audience needs to know. Um, for certain novelists, again, we talked about video. Um, a tactic that's really important for everybody is getting book reviews. So how are you going to get those all important book reviews that need to go up on your online sales pages as evidence that your book is a low risk purchase for people who discover it randomly or who get there through your marketing efforts? So number one tactic, I think, for any kind of author is getting book reviews. So then if that might be your goal. Maybe your goal is 30 book reviews in the first 3 months of publication. What tactics are you going to use to get those reviews? So tactics are the things you do to hit your goals.
That first one that you mentioned is so genius that probably nobody, I would say
I know.
99% of authors never even think about it. I am in that 99%. It's like I don't
Yeah.
have a gardener in mind. There's no garden in my fast-paced military thriller. But that's so smart because it's like just because this isn't an author-centric blog, like
Mhm.
if you have a plot line or like you said, like a protagonist or something where like very central part of the story has to do with this topic, like that's awesome. That's just extra exposure. It actually fits and makes sense because I think that's really important. When I teach email marketing and list building, I'm like, yeah, I'd rather have 1,000 targeted readers than 10,000 Aunt Jane's and Uncle Joe's,
Mhm.
stuff like that, right? So like you're talking a really kind of out of the box strategy, but it's still very targeted and makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's out of the box, but it's effective. And I would love for the novelists watching us today to give that a try. And I do have a blog post on it on my site, which is buildbookbuzz.com/blog. I've got a search box, but I do have a blog post that walks novelists through this concept and explains how to do it.
Yeah, I've read your blogs. I absolutely recommend anybody go check those. They're awesome. They're very well done. And like you explain things on video, you explain things in your blogs very simply too, but they make a lot of sense and they're very actionable and applicable to people when they read those. So I recommend people read
Thank
that for
you.
sure.
So question number 6, Philip, is how much can I spend to promote my book?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, yeah, and that's your budget. That's your book marketing budget. And most people say nothing. I don't have a budget. I don't have a budget. And boy, I can relate because you know how it is, Philip. You've got to spend money to make money, but if you don't have it to spend, you're in trouble. And for a lot of people, this is a hobby, not a profession. So they have to be careful about how they spend money on the book side of their life. There are lots of things you can do for free, lots and lots. And I've got blog posts. that list and explain how to do certain free tasks. So there are lots of things that you can do for free. But if you are ready to kind of go next level, you just mentioned email marketing. Well, when you really get successful, email marketing is going to cost you a little money because you need to be paying for an email service provider that charges a fee that isn't free. Because with everything, even with email marketing, at some point you get what you pay for, and you will outgrow any free options. And so that might cost. You certainly need to spend money on a good cover, a professional editor, and a proofreader. For me, those are non-negotiables for anybody who is serious about being an author versus just a hobbyist with a story they've got to get out of their heart and onto paper. They've really got to spend that money if they really are about that big goal. They're changing the world with their books. So there's that. And then you might reach a point where you're ready to level up, and you want to start spending money on advertising. And that might be advertising in the newsletters that allow you to promote your book when you're offering it free so that you can get downloads and hopefully get readers and then hopefully get reviews, or those newsletters that let you advertise a deal price on your book, but also Amazon advertising, not free. So if you want to get into ads on Amazon, which, think about it, I mean, this is where people are searching for books. It's on Amazon. So that makes sense as a place where you'd want to promote your book. A lot of people have success with Facebook ads too, because you can reach a very targeted audience with Facebook ads. So that works for a lot of authors. But all of this costs money, right, Philip?
Yeah, nothing worth it in life is free, unfortunately. And you talking about, you get what you pay for and stuff like that. There's a huge, he's an old school like direct mail marketer, but his name's Dan Kennedy. But he has a saying, and it's whoever can pay, whoever can spend the most to acquire a customer wins. Now I know that's kind of scary, especially when we're talking
Mhm.
authors, because I mean, we're not most of us aren't flush with cash, with pockets, dollar bills just falling out of our pockets. Like, oh, where can I send this? Because I have way too much money. But like at a certain point, if you're super, super serious, you've got to figure out ways to, like you mentioned with your non-negotiables, which are my non-negotiables too. I've seen people do their own covers, and like that's fine, but like I'm always of mind to go pay professionals who have a track record, who do this specific job. Like maybe that's like the only thing they focus on, and I know I'm going to get a product what I'm paying for. That doesn't mean you have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars, right?
Right.
Like do your research, your homework, see the kind of work they put out there and stuff like that. But like you said, I think it's so key. You get what you pay for, and eventually you're going to outgrow the free stuff, and things are going to need to kind of go into a different direction if you're really serious.
And to your point about whoever spends the most has the most sales, I agree that that is how the world works. I will also say that two things. One is, just because you buy the book doesn't mean you read it.
Yeah, true.
So so you've won as an author. If somebody buys their book, who cares if they read it? You just want the royalties there. So there's that. Um, and a lot of times people with deep pockets self-publish, and spend a lot of money on the manufacture of the book. It looks good, and they've got this elaborate marketing campaign. And many times they're internet marketers, and all their internet marketers buddies are out there promoting the book for them because they all do this for each other, yada, yada, yada. The point is, they spend a lot of money and time creating a product that looks really nice. But how many times as a reader have you gotten sucked in by this? And I'm right there with you. Gotten sucked in. You got that book maybe at a great price, and it's a hardcover to boot. You got it at a great price, and you start reading it, and you're like, whoa, there's nothing here. There's no there. It's kind of a lot of fluff. It's kind of non-specific. And oh, I discover that what they've done is try to lure me into their expensive coaching program. And there they will give me the specifics that I thought I was going to get in the book. So they have the most money, they throw that money at books, they sell the most books. But if you're building a career as an author, you never want to disappoint your readers. So you've really got to deliver. And there are a lot of great marketers, online marketers in particular, who really do deliver. They're part of that network, but they really do deliver on their content. So just be aware that don't never disappoint your audience with smoke and mirrors, right?
I, I think that's so I that couldn't be more well put. I have two pillars for my life and business is transparency and authenticity because I think
Hmm.
like you said, there's too much fluff and distractions to kind of keep you away from maybe discovering out the thing they don't want you to discover because they want you in the door just to back end you
Yes.
to like it's kind of like the carrot dangling in front of the horse to keep the horse moving or the donkey or whatever it is. So yeah, I agree, don't be that person. Please. Yeah, I agree. Okay.
All right. So
Yeah.
question number 7 is, what's my timeline? And that's obvious. That's just, when are you going to start? When are you going to finish? And what are you going to do in that time frame? What you want to do is literally pull out a calendar. For this kind of thing, I print out a calendar. I'll search online for, September calendar, October calendar, November calendar, and you can get these free ones. Fill up your screen, fill up an 8.5 by 11-inch page. I print them, and for my starting point, I handwrite in those blocks. This is what I'm going to do when. And I have a sense of how long it's going to take me and a sense of what's the next step and when do I need to do that next step. So I start on paper. Everybody has their own approach, but I start on paper for my timelines for these sorts of things. And then I use a digital calendar. I use Google Calendars on my desktop and on my phone. So then I transfer everything that I thought out on paper and I add it to my online calendar, and I set it up so that I get a reminder to do something at the right time. So, in other words, if my goal is to create 5 videos for Instagram Reels, and I know how long each Instagram Reel is going to take me, and I want to batch produce these in one video setting. Um, I can't just say, okay, this is the day I'm going to do these videos and just poof, it's all ready. I will back out a couple days and I will add to my calendar, um, develop concepts for 5 Instagram reels. Roughly script your 5 Instagram reels. I back out to give me time to do the specific activity. So you really, when you're kind of mapping all these things out, you sort of have to have, I think, a process oriented mindset, but we all know how to plan. So this will probably be the easiest part of all of it, is just dropping in what are you going to do and when are you going to do it, and factoring in the time to make it all happen.
Now, is there like a typical timeline? Like, I know it's probably very
Mm.
subjective to the author, but like, I've seen people like Mark Dawson and some other things. They have very like detailed, like 180-day pre-launch plans, and it's like day one or like day 180 down to like 130. You do this from 130 down to like it's very specific, and it's probably just his what he does, and he's just like, hey, here's what I do that works. Like you
Mm.
can model it to yourself. Um, is there anything like that? Should there be a specific time frame, maybe like a range, or is it just like figure out what works for you, what you think you can put in to get it done and just try to figure it out and maybe fine tune it over time?
Yeah, I love that you're bringing this up. There are no hard and fast rules, thank heavens, because most people would feel like failures if they were.
Yeah.
Because, Philip, the norm is, my book is on Amazon. Now what? That's how most authors approach this. So if we tell them, oh, your timeline needs to start 180 days before your book goes live on Amazon, they're like, oh, crap, I blew it. And then they're dejected and they lose all that fire, all that energy. So there is no specific timeline. In an ideal world, you are starting at least 6 months before your book is published because there's a lot of groundwork you want to set, so that you can build relationships and networks that you can then leverage when the book is published. But that's not to say that if your book is out and you haven't even thought about this yet, that you are out of luck. It just means now you really got to sit down and get focused about what you're going to do. Now, in terms of length of time, um, let's think of it. So I want you to start ideally before your book is published, because I want you to start making connections. I want you to connect with the people who can give you a fantastic endorsement for your cover, all those sorts of things. But let's address this whole idea of when do you stop? I vote for never. Because, like I said earlier, readers don't care when your book was published. New is not a word that's relevant to them in most cases. Um, so I want, as long as your book is available for purchase, I want you to be out there promoting it. Is that realistic? Maybe if you write a series, you can't, you just can't always be promoting a specific title in the series, but you can always be promoting the series. So I want people to just remember that it's not about the launch. The launch is important, but launches can be very, very disappointing because they bring with them expectations for fantastic success right out of the gate. And you've heard this used with authorship in the past. Being an author is a marathon, not a sprint. And a launch is a sprint tactic. So, yes, it needs to be in your plan, but you can't stop then. And if you do stop, then you're going to be very disappointed in the results. And I don't want to see disappointment. I want to see smiles.
Yeah, same here. And I'll give just a real world example to provide
Mhm.
context for that is I was that author who wrote and published my book in like 4 months. I had no plan. I did no launch. I had no email list. I told nobody but my friends and family that I was doing this. And then I published it on Amazon. And I was just like, crickets. What do I do now? Sitting on my hands. Nobody's reading my book. I'm getting no like I was so lost because I did none of the work beforehand. So I did that a year later. This is to your point about it doesn't have to be a new book. Nobody really cares,
Mhm.
right? As long as it's not topic specific. And it's like they read a book, they're like, well, this made sense 10 years ago, but this is obviously not relevant now. But for fiction, that's typically not the case, if ever. And so a year later, I did nothing right. I did nothing that I should have been doing beforehand. A year later, the book won an award. I'm not doing this to brag. I'm just showing people like I always tell myself I'm the biggest idiot I know. If you don't believe me, ask my wife. So it's like, if I can do it, so could everybody else in the entire world.
Mhm.
So a year later, the book won an award. You mentioned it. You have your books like this. My book ended up being in like a category bestseller in Amazon, and it actually ended up in the top 25 across the whole U.S. store. Um, and then now it's close to 300 reviews between Amazon and Goodreads. But that was all stuff I did after launching my book. It not even launching, just publishing because I had
Yeah.
no plans. So it's very, very doable. If you're like, oh, my book's been out for a year or 2 years, or maybe even I just launched my book and I have no plan, like you just like you said, it's never too late. You just have to try to get started and start figuring things out along the way, and it could make a huge difference.
That is such a great example. I'm so glad you shared that, and congratulations. I mean, how exciting is all of that? But it's exactly exactly that. And I say the same thing to people. Look at it. If I can do it, you can do it. Because I'm average at best. Um, we are both examples of how just if you invest the time to learn, which is what people are doing by watching us today, if you invest the time to learn and you're motivated and you make time for it, you can make the most amazing things happen. It just has to be, part of your goals, and you have to make it a priority now and then.
Yeah, if you don't start, you'll never get track. It's like the old saying goes: if you never ask the question, the answer is always going to be no. So like, if you never
Hmm.
start the process, you're just going to be stuck in the same place today, 6 months later, a year later, and stuff like that. So I have one more question, and it's kind of an overarching question about all the questions we just covered.
Yeah.
And this is, this just kind of came to me now because I'm curious from my own perspective. These 7 questions, are they linear? Should they be, is it should be you should ask question number one, then you should ask question number two,
Mhm.
or can you move them around and do them at different times, or should it be kind of like an ordered process, or does it even matter?
I think it is linear because you won't know what tactics to use if you don't know who your target audience is. So it does need to be linear. I mean, you do need to think about it, but what you can also do is sort of get your sense, and my template will help with that. But get your sense of what, what questions you need to answer, what are the elements of a book marketing plan. And you can think about it all collectively before you sit down to actually write it. But the process itself is, yeah, you need to know your audience. Yes, you need to know what you want to accomplish. So, and then you need the strategy that will help you define the tactics. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I figured that was it. That just
Hmm.
I always liked a lot of times I work backwards on things.
Yeah.
And just because I'm all, long picture, big picture, like you said, authoring is a marathon, not a sprint. And I see a lot of authors, um, this will be the last point I make, and then we'll close it out, is I see a lot of authors, they don't have that mindset early on or, at all, where they're kind of focused on the right now, which you should. If you're working on a book, you're going to publish a book, like that needs your time and attention. But if there's no long-term thought process or long-term goal for what you're trying to do, I think success can be kind of hard to find and come across. If you're just constantly, you said something really cool, was a book launch is like a sprint tactic. I think that's such a cool sentence, um, for kind of a marathon strategy, which is really cool. You should have those sprint tactics in there if you can pull them off correctly. But even you said, like, those come with expectations. They could really let people down and maybe kind of stop them in their tracks and
Mhm.
really bum them out, for lack of a better term. So kind of always having that long-term goal. And I'm curious if you think this way too. Always having that long-term approach in mind, I think can really help you, not even in the present, but then also for the strategies and the things that you implement during that process, if your goal is to be a full-time successful author.
I totally agree. And having that long-term goal in mind, also just that phrase long term reminds you that you're not going to be an overnight success. A few people are, but most are not. But to your point about how you sometimes start at the end and work backwards, that's actually a great way to approach your book marketing plan timeline because you can say, okay, this is where I want to be at this point. And then you go backwards from there. Okay, what do I need to do to get there? And a lot of people, their brains work that way. So it's called a reverse calendar. So sometimes they plan out what they need to do by starting at the end goal and saying, okay, so how much time do I need to get to that point? And then they start going backwards as they plan. So it's something to think about.
Yeah, because I think if you can, and not everybody thinks that way, and that's cool. Like I said, and like you mentioned before, and a lot of people I've talked to mention this, like, these strategies and tactics are very subjective to the author. So figure out
Yes.
what works, but there are things that need to be implemented across the board, but maybe you just do them a little differently. But for me, the way I think that way, maybe just because it's the way my brain is wired, which can be kind of scary sometimes, but is it changes a plan in my mind from a reactive plan to an active plan. So rather than taking it from the beginning and then kind of reacting along the way, hoping and making things work. My plan is to start at the end and kind of work the steps backwards. That's going to get me to that goal. So there's as little reactive action happening as possible throughout that process. But again, it's very much my personality and the way my mind works. So it's about figuring out what works for you and what you're going to be able to stick to and pull off.
Yes, and to that point about knowing yourself, I think that's really important as you think about the tactics for your book marketing plan. What you're looking for really is the intersection between what you enjoy, what you do best, and where you will find your readers. So again, I what I do best is writing. So I find my intersection with that. But for somebody else who just loves Instagram, they're going to be on Instagram whether or TikTok. They're going to be using it whether their audience is there or not. It would be a happy coincidence if their audience is there. So if that's where you're going to be and if that's what you love doing and your audience is there, focus on that. Getting good at using that platform is going to be one of your keys to success. So a lot of it's really about knowing yourself and knowing your audience.
Yep, 100% agree. Okay, I'm glad I'm not crazy on that on that topic. Um, okay, that really is all the questions and things I have. So, is there anything that you want to mention? Any parting words? Something maybe we didn't touch on that you think could be important for this topic, or something you want to reiterate? And then we will mention again your very helpful and kind of fill in the blank template that you mentioned at the very beginning, and then make sure people know where to find you. And then I'll let you off the hook here.
Thank you. As I think about it, I think what I want people to one thing I want people to remember from this is that it's never too late to start. Don't think that just because your book has been out for 6 months that it's too late. You really should just start writing the next book. Well, maybe you should start writing the next book, but don't give up on that first book. That book deserves to be found. It deserves to be read. It deserves to be loved. It deserves to make people laugh, make people cry, whatever it is. You poured your heart and soul into that book. Don't give up on it easily. Just spend some time learning what you need to do and then take action wherever you are in this process.
Agreed. Okay, awesome. All right. So again, if you want to mention that template and kind of just a brief breakdown of what it is and
Yeah.
where they can find it. And of course, everybody watching and listening, we're going to have these links under this video. So she'll tell you exactly what it is, but then we'll also have a link to be able to make sure you can go get it real easily too.
Right, just click on that link. But the book marketing plan template starts with it details the elements you include in your book marketing plan that all relate to the questions we've just asked, explains what they are, and gives examples. The tactics section is especially long because, along with giving examples of tactics, I've linked to a lot of how-to content online so that if you think, oh, that looks interesting, you can click and then get some how-to information that kind of moves you farther ahead. So you learn what the elements are, you see examples of them, and then that's followed by the fill in the blanks form that you can just print and fill out as you build your book marketing plan. And I just want to tell people, don't be intimidated by this. Oh, a marketing plan. Oh my gosh, that's over my head. No, it isn't. You can just use bullet points, just use bullet points to say, here's what I know about my situation. Here's what I know about my target audience. Don't worry about prose. This is something only you will use. Nobody else needs to see it. So don't worry about how you present the information. Focus on just capturing the information that will help you create that roadmap that can be the difference between success and failure for you.
100%. I always think simplicity, if done
Yes.
correctly, is the best way to make. I say simplicity scales. I didn't make that up. I hear it all the time because people are constantly looking for the new shiny object and the new this and that and things that get over complicated for zero. Kind of like you mentioned earlier, where it's like this easy concept that could be real simple just to tell people, but they cover it with all this fluff because they're that smoke and mirror tactic and stuff like that. But like,
Mm.
just make this as simple as you can for yourself, and I promise it's going to make life way easier. Not now, but also, down the road in the long run.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, so we'll put that template down there. If people want to go check out your blog, which they should, and your website, and go find out more about you, where you at?
Go to buildbookbuzz.com/blog. And if you'd like to sign up for my free weekly how-to newsletter, go to buildbookbuzz.com/gift. Buildbookbuzz.com/gift. Give me your name and email address. You'll get a free gift and lots of how-to information in your inbox every week.
Yep, awesome. I know Sandra. She's an information um that's for sure. You absolutely know what you're talking about across the board and a lot of different things. So I always tell people about you because I think you I've said this 100 times even off air, but like the way you understand things and how you relay that information is so simple, but it's also actionable and it makes sense so people can actually go apply it, which is hard to find a lot of times. So I think people benefit from being in your world 100%.
Thank you
Um,
so much. That is absolutely my goal. So I'm glad it's working. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Well, I will stop talking your ear off. I promise I could do this forever. I could make this a 3-hour Joe Rogan podcast if I wanted to, but I won't do that to you and I won't do that to everybody else. So thank you again for being here. I love talking to you all the time. This is so fun and wonderful. Your talks are always informative and helpful. I learn something all the time. I did today, more than one thing. So hopefully everybody listening, watching, however you're taking this in, you took at least one thing away from here. Download that template, apply it to your marketing plan. If you've never done marketing, if you've never developed a marketing plan before, this would be a great place to start. Or maybe you have a marketing plan and you're looking for something maybe that's not working. Download this template and see what you can implement into your marketing plan now to tweak it and maybe take things to the next level. So Sandra, thank you so much for being here. I love talking to you. This was great. And everybody watching or listening, we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.
Thank you.